Food and Wine Insider is a weekly look at a $1.5 trillion industry touching every American. Devoted to the business of purveying food and decanting wines, Food and Wine Radio is a unique program highlighting not food recipes or wine vintages, but how to make a profit while satisfying America's palates. In this competitive but highly rewarding sector, many men and women have made profits while fulfilling a dream. Food and Wine Insider is all about better managing any business involving food and wine. Each week, your co-hosts sit down with successful restaurateurs, food mavens, winery vintners, store owners, food suppliers, and other leaders in the worldwide industry that centers on foodstuff and wine. In frank give-and-take sessions, guests and panelists talk about the business of bringing healthy and pleasurable foods and wines to others. Your Food and Wine Radio host are Ann Daw, former president of the Specialty Food Association and a longtime food executive who has held senior positions both here and abroad with Kraft Foods and Philip Morris. Don Mazzella, a nationally known business commentator. On each show, they invite leaders of the world's culinary and wine industries to share the secrets of their success. Visit us at foodandwineinsider.com.
And our next guest is Jennie Ripps. She is founder, and I love this title, CEO of Owl's Brew Radler and Owl's Brew Mixer. Jennie, welcome to the program. And I just have to ask, how did you come up with CEO? It's one of the most unusual names I've heard before we go to Ann.
Oh, thank you, and thanks for having me on the program. The owl is our logo, and we wanted to be like a tech company with a cute name. Just joking, no, but the owl is our logo, and so we sort of thought it would be fun and light to say CEO versus just CEO.
Well, it's just terrific, and it shows just so much cleverness. But with that note, I turn it over to Ann Daw, and take it away, Ann.
Thank you so much, Don. I'm just going to give a little bit of introduction on Jennie. Jennie Ripps is the founder and CEO or CEO of Owl's Brew. It's a tea crafted for cocktails, founded in 2013 with her partner Maria Littlefield. Jennie is also the founder of Brew Lab Tea, an artisanal New York City-based company that specializes in creating custom and private label tea blends for restaurants, coffee shops, hotels, and retailers. Jennie, welcome to the program.
Great. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Jennie, tea has inspired you, it seems like, for a very long time now. Could you talk about the impetus for your interest in tea?
Sure. So I've been in the tea business for over 10 years now in various ways. And I started out really just blending teas, which is what Brew Lab is. Brew Lab is a company where we create custom tea programs for local restaurants in New York. But for me, my initial interest in tea sort of came from the fact that you could take something, green tea, white tea, drop it in water, whether it's hot water, cool water, ambient water, and literally within minutes change both the flavor and the sort of functional properties of the water. So there's almost an alchemy to it or a magic to it. You add a green tea to water and all of a sudden you have vitamin C, you have something that boosts your metabolism, you add hibiscus, and all of a sudden you have something like great for your skin, and it's hot, pink, and tart. And so for me, working with Owl's Brew and making tea for cocktails or making a tea beer or working with restaurants, it's this idea that you can use tea and botanicals to make something unique and flavorful that also has healthful properties and health benefits.
That's fantastic, and I really appreciate your sharing that. You and Maria Littlefield, your partner, met somewhat by accident. Could you tell us that story?
We did. It's funny. It was kind of not love at first sight, but it was a sort of meeting of the minds instantly. in my first job in New York, which had nothing to do with tea, I was interviewing for an intern, and Maria had just graduated from college. And she came in. I met with her. She had graduated, moved to New York that day. I think she was waiting for her bed to arrive, and sort of just like literally it was her first job interview. And I met with her for an hour, and this was 9 years ago. And I walked out of the room, and I was just so – I didn't know. I felt so strongly that I wanted to hire her, but this was the first time I had ever been able to – and I thought, do you really hire the first person you meet on the first in the first hour you meet them? And I walked out of the room, and I walked back in, and I offered her the job, and she accepted immediately. And we've been working together for 9 years now, and it's just been a really, really amazing partnership. And it's great and incredibly serendipitous that we met 9 years ago.
And I would love for you to talk and share with our listeners your interest for what you call wise cocktails, how that spread, because it seemed like in New York City there was an interest in new healthy and inspired cocktails, and you created the notion of a wise cocktail. Talk a little bit about that, because I think it's really interesting.
Thank you. So when we first started out about 5 years ago, 6 years ago with Owl's Brew, you would go out at night or in the evening, and all of the cocktails were always really fruit-based, really sugar-based. And at the time I was working with tea already with Brew Lab, and I just thought, why do I need to sort of commit to having all of this sugar just because I want to have a cocktail? And so I thought, I would never say, let's make healthy cocktails, because if you're putting gin into it, it's not, I think it's difficult to position it as healthy. But this idea that you can use tea and botanicals to make a craft cocktail where you're actually, first of all, using a lot less sugar, and second of all, getting antioxidants or getting a little vitamin C. It's funny, our Radlers, which are a mix of beer and tea, actually in each can there's 40% of your daily vitamin C. I would never advertise that, but because we're actually using whole ingredients in tea and botanicals with spirits or with beer, you're actually getting, we say drink wise. We wouldn't say drink healthy, but we say drink wise.
Okay. And when did you realize you had a business opportunity, and how did you get started in producing your product, Owl's Brew?
So my story is sort of one of these. I went from having, a lot of tea at home to having too much tea at home to calling I had a different job, calling a tea importer and saying, could you sell me tea by the pound? And then sort of working out of a brownstone in a completely different office, in a completely different industry, sort of saying to the person I worked with, hey, would you mind if I rented the third floor of this brownstone in order to do my tea blending? So it sort of went from being something I was passionate about as a consumer, and sort of went into being something that I was actually doing. And at a certain point, I started reaching out to people I knew and sort of testing them on my teas. I started hosting tea cocktail parties. And as I continued to sort of, out of this brownstone, host people, sample them on tea cocktails, I realized that people loved them. And then at this point, Maria and I were co-founders. We were working on the tea cocktails together. And we started, because of these tea cocktail parties, people began to ask us, will you, come to Super Bowl and make tea cocktails for us? Will you come, out to Art Basel and make tea cocktails for this event? So we started traveling around the country with suitcases full of lemon verbena or green tea, which meant that the TSA was always checking us. We were really on a watch list because no one knew why we had bags of botanicals with us. And it was during that time, really, when I was just on my own, sort of trying things out and then beginning to sort of work bringing tea cocktails to events. That was when I realized that people would buy tea cocktails if we were able to put them into a bottle and stop, putting loose tea leaves into suitcases.
Thank you for that. And then we've been talking with Jennie Ripps. She's the founder and CEO of Owl's Brew. I wanted to ask, it's sort of a follow-up question to Dawn's at the beginning. How did you come up with the name? And please describe the packaging as it really stands out among the crowd.
Oh, thank you. So the name, again, the idea of the wise owl and this idea of drinking wise, at Owl's Brew, we're really committed to this idea of using whole ingredients, real ingredients. We sort of think that you should know what you're putting into your body, even if you're mixing it with tequila or beer. So the wise owl has to do with that idea of knowing ingredients. And the packaging, would you like to, Anne, should I describe the packaging for the mixer or for the Radler?
Let's describe Owl's Brew, because I'm going to get to the Radler later, because I think that's also a really interesting product line.
Okay, perfect. So the Owl's Brew mixer is in a matte black bottle. And when we initially started 5 or 6 years ago, it was today, when you think about mixing organic gin with botanical tea, that doesn't seem so crazy. But 5 years ago, we sort of, it felt sort of very out there a little bit, whimsical, a little bit, possibly loopy. And so we really wanted something that was very attractive, almost handsome, and that on the shelf would be impactful. So we have a matte black bottle with a black label, and then there are pops of color for each flavor.
Fantastic. And your first flavors were called the Classic, Cocolata, and Pink and Black. Can you explain a little bit about each of those?
Sure. And one thing that's actually we've done recently is we've transitioned the names of our cocktails over to names that are a little more understandable. So Pink and Black, which is a Darjeeling tea with hibiscus and strawberry, we've now named it the Strawberry Manhattan. And Cocolata, which is a chai tea, so cloves, ginger, cinnamon, cardamom, a black tea mixed with pineapple. We've changed that over to a chai piña. So one of our key learnings has actually been that when you have something in a beautiful but mysterious-looking black bottle, it's easier if you say what it is. And this change, Anne, was literally within the past 4 or 5 months. It was actually, as we were entering the conventional channel, we decided to make this label change.
So building on that, and I think that's really interesting that you made the product more approachable, but the black bottle more mysterious, which I think is a really interesting combination of things. When did you decide to sell first? What was it in your mind, a product for retail or food service or the liquor channel? How did you decide?
That's a great question. When we first exhibited at our first fancy food show, that was where we were, showcasing the product for the first time. And I think, we really thought we would get picked up by little boutiques in New York that were local. And the first thing that happened was that Bevmo picked us up. And Bevmo was our first client. And I can still remember having the conversation with our buyer where he said, we were holding a bottle that our bottles hadn't come out of production yet, like from the place that was actually decorating them. So we had spray painted our bottles with Martha Stewart chalkboard paint, and I'm holding this chalkboard painted mock bottle. And, he says, how many pallets can you send us? So, we really thought that we would start out locally in New York at sort of smaller stores, but we ended up building our business really at chains. And because of the type of product it is, we've been sold at places like Williams-Sonoma, but we also were picked up by Whole Foods because it's sort of a lifestyle product. So we were able to be at a Total Wine as well as a, Williams-Sonoma as well as a Whole Foods because different people, everyone's making cocktails who goes into those stores. It's not the same as lettuce, which you would only get at Whole Foods.
And I think you also had a great enthusiasm among mixologists because you created some popularity at hotels and restaurants. So you're being very understated, but your Quality Meat, Smith and Wollensky, the Bowery Hotel. I mean, you're an unusual product and opportunity in that you've found ways to be both in food service and retail, and that's not typical. So I'm curious, what were some of the hiccups in producing the product? It must have been pretty scary having a mock-up bottle and somebody saying, "Can you send me a pallet?"
I know.
What were some of the hiccups in producing the product? And could you talk a little bit about the shelf life? Because I'm just curious about that.
Sure, of course. So, in terms of it being both on-premise and off-premise, that's been a challenge in a way, particularly in terms of product size, because our 16-ounce size is a smaller size is better for retail, and then we need a larger format size for food service. And then in terms of production hiccups along the way, I think we knew what we want when we first started. We knew what we wanted it to look like. We knew what we wanted it to taste like. But having that chalkboard painted bottle is a great example where Maria and I have always sort of joked that creating a product for the first time is sort of like putting together a jigsaw puzzle without that picture that shows you what it's supposed to look like. So, during my time, with Owl's Brew and now with the Radler, I've learned about things like plastisol lining on caps and, the way certain label formation. So it's just, operations is no longer our biggest challenge, but there was a huge learning curve for us when we were first launching the product in terms of, the timeline it would take to get a product to market. But we were lucky that we always had a formula great, and also to your point about shelf stability, safe. So those are two good things to have.
Because you've worked across several different types of channels, are you working with brokers? And if so, how do you keep tabs on the orders and the repeat purchases?
So we're very limited in terms of the amount that we work with brokers. We work with one broker on a few accounts, but in general, we are working directly with distributors or with accounts.
Oh, wow. And so do you have an internal sales team that's helping you do that? Because that's a lot of touch points.
Yes, and I think it's interesting. I think that, there are a lot of touch points with retail, and I think there are different infrastructures in terms of working with. I think it can be challenging no matter how you look at it, working with brokers or working with directly with retailers or distributors. For us, it's easier to control the process when we're working more directly. So we have one team member who's dedicated to Owl's Brew Mixer and to sort of the sales pipeline and execution related to that.
And just to follow up on that, how many people work in total in the company?
There are 9 people, including me and Maria, between the two companies, Owl's Brew Mixer and Radler.
So that clearly says to me you all wear a lot of hats.
Yes, we are very much a startup. We wash the dishes, and go. Our director of finance, is behind a booth at the fancy food show. We do wear a lot of hats in the company.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking with Jennie Ripps, founder and CEO of Owl's Brew. I wanted to shift gears a little bit, but I did want to talk about your Radler's line. But before I do that, I didn't ask you about online sales. How important is our online sales to your business, and what % do you find is going through that channel?
It's less online sales for the mixer, actually, and for the Radler are a small part of our business. I would say less than 10% of our business is online sales. We are carried online, we're on Amazon and we're on places like Food 52, and that's a great, but I would say that direct sales, like from our website, is less than, 7% of our business.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any reason why? Is it, do you find that it's because it's glass or people need to experience it? I'm just curious.
I think it's because it's glass, and I think it's for a few reasons. I think we haven't, that's not a place that we've leaned into that heavily yet. It's actually an initiative for us this year, sort of developing SEO. When we first started out, we were sort of more focused on brick and mortar. So I think part of it just has to do with our own prioritization. And yeah, I think also freight is a part of it with glass and shipping as well. But I think a lot of it just has to do with when we decide to focus on online.
Okay. And so now turning to the Radlers for tea-infused beer, I think it's 60% beer and 40% tea. I'm sure this product line has had to have created some unique challenges, such as finding a brewery willing to produce it. Can you tell us a little bit about the product and some of the hurdles you faced in bringing that product line to the consumer?
A mix of beer and tea. And what we actually do when we create it is we brew our beer to about an 8% ABV, and using our formulas, we then fresh brew organic tea next to the beer. And then before we bottle the beer, we mix the tea into the beer, or the tea and botanicals into the beer, which then brings it down to about 3.8% ABV. So you end up with it's a craft beer mixed with tea. It doesn't taste like beer. It doesn't taste like tea. It does taste really great. And I'm sorry, you'd asked me about some of the hurdles associated with
Sure. I think you needed to find a brewery that was willing to make it, correct?
Yes. So the way that Maria and I actually came up with the Radler is, and this will answer your question, is we found ourselves at trade shows at the end of a long few days, and everyone was drinking an Owl's Brew mixer with tequila or an Owl's Brew with gin, and Maria and I were always pairing our Radlers with craft beer, pairing our mixers with craft beer, and we fell in love with the flavor. And we then had about a year of our lives during which we whined a lot, and by that I mean every time we were somewhere where there was beer, we would complain and say we wished we had been making. And after about a year of that, we turned to each other and remembered that we are makers and creators, and if there was something on the market that we wanted to make, we should make it. And so we just loved it and couldn't find it, so we made it. So that's sort of how we came up with the Radler. And but then, as you alluded to, we needed to find a brewery that would make it. So we worked with a brewmaster. We developed our own beer formulas. That part was fine because the beer needed to match the tea. And then I must have called, 20 different breweries, 15 different breweries And I called them and I said, will you, brew some beer for me? And they said, sure. And I said, will you also brew tea for me? And 14 of the 15 pretty much hung up the phone. So,
oh, Lord.
Yeah, I mean, and what's funny is we really brew it in the way one brews beer. There isn't a huge difference. It's just there can be resistance to innovation. Especially when processes are like very granular and specific and codified. And so we just got a ton of no's and we got one yes. We work with a brewmaster who sort of saw our vision and saw that the brewing tea and brewing hops is not that different. And it was a happy ending, but it was certainly a challenge.
I know that we've kind of run out of time, but if you could really quickly, what advice would you give to a budding entrepreneur about getting into the beverage business?
Yes, I would say set up as many informational meetings with people who you either admire or are adjacent to the business as possible, because I don't think that Maria and I could have succeeded in building our businesses without the help of our mentors and advisors. And I think beginning by asking questions and being open to advice and just sort of listening first is the most important thing to do. And then sort of having people on your team and on your side, it really helps you avoid making mistakes that have to do with time and with money.
Thank you, Jennie. I think that is really wise advice. I'm not trying to pull any puns here, but I really appreciate that thought. And I'm going to turn it to Dawn to wrap us up. Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Jennie.
Listening to you made my mouth water for your products. We've been talking with Jennie Ripps, who is founder, and I love this title, C.E. Owl of Owls Brew, Radler, and Owls Brew Mixer. A link to her website will be on foodandwineinsider.com tonight, where you can also hear this and all other past and future programs. And also you can tell us guests you might like to hear on this program. Jennie, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me on. I had a lot of fun talking with you both. Thank you.
To be successful, most restaurant owners require extra capital from time to time. When you need funding to renovate, buy equipment, or manage cash flow, you don't have time to track down financial statements or wait weeks for a decision. That's where Cabbage can help. Cabbage gives small businesses access to a line of credit of up to $200,000. Apply online and you'll get a decision right away. Since Cabbage is a line of credit, you can take the exact amount you need. You never have to reapply to take additional loans, and you'll only pay for the funds you use. Cabbage has helped more than 230,000 businesses from every industry, and with $4 billion in funding, Cabbage is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau and was named the Forbes Top 100 Companies twice in a row. Check out Cabbage at cabbagewithak.com/foodandwine, and you'll get a $50 gift card when you qualify. That's KABBAGE.com/foodandwine.
Line of credit is subject to credit approval. See terms and conditions. All Cabbage business loans are issued by Celtic Bank, a Utah chartered industrial bank, member FDIC.
You are listening to Ann Daw and Dawn Mazzella, and the program is Food and Wine Insider. Remember, our programs are heard every Wednesday and Saturday on this station via AMFM247.com or on iHeartRadio, as well as Roku Television, foodandwineinsider.com.
And one of the cleverest marketing efforts I have seen recently involved Michel Cluizel Chocolates. I ran into them at the Curve Show. That is the lingerie and foundation show. And I was wondering, what is a chocolate company doing at a a lingerie and foundation show. Well, I started talking with Jacques Dahan, who pointed out to me intimates and lingerie is still something that women go out of the home for because they have to try it on, and he developed special opportunities for shops and for lines. So I invited him on the show. Jacques, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Don.
Well, without further ado, here's Ann.
Thank you, Don. Well, just by way of introduction, Jacques Dahan is President USA, JacqAues, headquartered in West Berlin, New Jersey. While the French company has been around for over 70 years, the U.S. store was opened sometime, I think, in 2004. So, Jacques, welcome to Food and Wine Insider.
Thank you, Anne. A pleasure to be with you and Don.
Wonderful. How long have you been with the company? What were the early product introductions into the U.S. before you opened what I think is called a Chocolatier?
Oh, okay. So, I mean, multiple questions. So, I started with the company when we founded the American branch of Michel Cluizel, which was I think we are in our 15th year. Prior to that, Michel Cluizel had an importer for probably 4 or 5 years. So it's been over 20 years that basically the Cluizel family is in the U.S. market. Now, regarding the Chocolatier, it's a little bit different because when we first opened, we were based in Pennsauken and we were doing mostly distribution, I would say exclusively distribution. And then quickly, we teamed up with a gentleman that was working at ABC Carpet, and he said, let's open a corner store within the ABC Carpets, which is what we did. We stayed there 2 years, but we didn't have really a major impact because we were not visible from the outside. So after this closed, we tried to find another location, and we found another location on 5th Avenue, I would say about 2 blocks away from the Rockefeller Center, in the Diamond building. And there we had a lot of requests for product that would be at the same time kosher and why not parve. So we said, okay, look, this is not possible to do in France. So the Cluizel family said, okay, find another place where you can eventually manufacture. And we found a very nice building in West Berlin, so about in between, I would say, Philadelphia and Atlantic City. And the building was so big that we said, okay, we need to manufacture, but the Cluizel family insisted on the fact that at the same time we need to teach people about chocolate, because not all chocolate are the same. And so we opened first the Chocolatrium, basically on the same model that they had in France, and we realized quickly that that was not at all what our American friends wanted to see, because it was basically a museum where people walked around and read panels, and that was a little bit boring, to be honest with you. So we changed that to a personalized tour, guided tour, with tasting, of course. And sometimes we even do that in French, because we have a lot of teachers that bring their classrooms.
Well, wonderful. That was a great story and a fantastic background. I've read that pastry and chocolate making are rooted in chemistry with certain, as we call it, rules. What are those rules? For
Michel Cluizel?
Yes.
Or in general? I mean,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean that, in terms of the Cluizel family, basically the company business started in 1948 after the war. They were basically pastry chefs. And they had a pastry shop in Normandy. We know what happened after the Second World War. So they had to regroup in their in Michel's grandparents' attics. And, of course, in an attic selling pastries was not possible. Then what happened at that time is that, they decided, okay, since we can't do pastries, let's make chocolate. And that's how they started to do chocolate. It's true that it's something that, in France is taken very seriously. And that's something that, for example, we explain all the time. Just to give you an example, yesterday we had a big group of kids from a summer camp. And, we tell them, we said, look, you will taste some pastries. Most of them you've maybe never tasted that in your life because it's French pastries. And we tell them, go slow. When we do a pastry in France, most of the time, what's very important is that you get different texture and different flavors potentially, and not just one big thing that will fill you up. And for the chocolate, it's exactly the same thing. Many chocolates today have several layers, or sometimes just the same product is run completely differently. For example, we make probably, I would say, 30 different kinds of praline paste being almond and hazelnuts. But the roasting of the caramelization of the sugar, the roasting of the nuts, and the grinding will change completely the final result.
Fantastic. You know, I think the U.S. palate has changed a lot in terms of chocolate. I happen to enjoy fine chocolate, and I know in France, a afternoon snack for a child tends to be a baguette with chocolate inside, which is not really common here in the U.S. But I would love to hear how you compare the French palate to the American palate for chocolate. How do you think it's changing in the U.S.?
A lot. I mean, I've been here 25 years, and what I love every day in this country is the fact that, people are very open-minded, probably even more so than in France. And I don't say that lightly because I think that really I believe in that. In France, most of the product, and if we take the chocolate, there are some core rules that are rooted in the habits. People, for example, will know praline and will know ganache. But then most of the time it will be very classical. And that's what they want. And that's, I remember a long time ago meeting with who was considered the Pope of the ganache, Robert Lynx, from La Maison du Chocolat. And I was a young rep, and he told me, he said, Jacques, I make the product that I like. And I hope that some people will like it as well. And Michel Cluizel started exactly the same way, which means that, for him, what's important is not to go with the trend, but to stay true to the core value of the product. And that's why, for example, we don't have any extravagant flavor. The American palate is completely different. Americans want to be challenged, want to see something. I would say sometimes the crazier, the better. Maybe they won't like it and they will try it only once, but they want to try it. Most of the French will say no. Okay, that's great to have this flavor on the shelf. But when they will buy the very traditional one.
Yeah. You make a lot of products in the West Berlin factory. I think you have pralines, you have macarons, you have bean to bar chocolate, You have all kinds. Why did you decide to hand make your products in the U.S.? Because to make chocolate is quite a process. You have to conch the chocolate and you have to, conch the beans and all that sort of thing. Just talk about that a little bit because hand making chocolate is quite an art.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't do from the beans to the finished product. We get still the chocolate couverture, as we call it, from Michel Cluizel France, because, again, I think that, today you can make eventually your own couverture and you have some new equipment and everything like that. But if you want really a very high quality in different reasons, we prefer to buy still the couverture from France. However, based on what I told you before, I realized that, the American market wanted to have something also different. And so when the Cluizel family told me, okay, you can start manufacturing as long as we know what you're doing and it's very high-end, fine. Then I came up with something that would be unique, that they don't do in France, that might be appreciated here in the U.S. And I will give you just an example. I was born a long time ago in Casablanca, and I was raised with mint tea, okay? And fresh mint tea, of course. I'm not talking about the bag. I'm talking about the fresh mint. And so I said, why don't we try to put mint into the chocolate, but a real mint? So when, at that time, we were certified kosher, so the rabbi came, he said, oh, yeah, okay, you want to do the mint? No problem. But first you have to buy a light table. I said, what do you mean? He said, because after you wash each leaf separately, yourself, you can't give that to anybody else. You have to do that yourself because you'll be the only one that I will trust for this kind of job. Then after that, you have to go and put the mesh screen to get the product on a light table to make sure that there is no bugs. Because if there is a bug, it's not kosher, and so therefore you can't use it. And that was quite a challenge. But today, when we explain to consumer here in West Berlin and at the same time at the store that each leaf is washed one by one, dried, then crystallized in the sugar, and then added into the chocolate, even the people that don't like mint, when they try it, they said, "Oh my God, that's great." And in France, for example, they would not be able to do that because at their level, it will be impossible to do this kind of small job.
Well, I thank you for that. We've been talking with Jacques Dahan, who's the president USA of Chocolate, Michel Cluizel. I'm curious about, because, pralines versus macaron versus chocolate, they require very different crafts. How many chefs do you have? And do you have people who make specific products, or do they tend to be able to make all different types of products?
When we hire a chef, most of the time, and that's quite a challenge today, you're really pinpointing the problems that I think a lot of people today have, especially in the artisan world, is that to get the right people to do the thing. And we've tried to hire people here in West Berlin from America, and that were trained in America, and it was almost impossible to get people that could be versatile and do everything at once. So we bring chefs from France, and most of the time, because in the courses in France, they start with pastry, and then they go to chocolate after that. So basically, what we do here is very limited. We have only few products in French pastries, like what we call the Napoleon, which in French we call the millefeuille. We do some éclairs, we do some opéra, very traditional pastries. Then we do the macaron and then chocolate, and that's it. We don't get involved into the whole array of pastries and everything, but you're right. They have to know that, and most of the time we ask them to come here to look around, to try and do a tasting for us, or sometimes to do that in France as well for Marc Cluizel and his family, and Michel, of course. And then after that, if we feel that they are good, then we bring them over.
Fantastic. As I understand it, éclairs and macarons still require gluten flour. Do you think it's important to find a substitute, or should some products just not be tampered with?
I mean that, it depends. Macaron, we don't need, they are gluten-free, because for the macaron, we use almond meal. The same way, for example, we developed several products because we had so much almond meal, of course, here. Like, for example, we have a brownie that is one of our bestsellers in our stores in Manhattan and here as well. And this one are gluten-free. However, up until now, we were not able to develop a puff pastry or to develop an éclair that is completely gluten-free. I know that some people have tried. For us, we have not succeeded yet. But I'm very stubborn, so we will continue.
Americans sort of like to analyze things. And so if someone comes into your shop and they say, well, what should I look for in a chocolate? What would you say to them?
I think that, people should look for what they like. And, we always have this question at the end of the tour where people said, okay, what's your favorite chocolate? Or what do you consider as being the best chocolate in the world? And, of course, they're expecting that I say Michel Cluizel. And I never say that. And honestly, it's not because I don't want to say that I like the product that, I make and that I sell and the Cluizel family and everything like that, but because I think that, if people get pleasure with a bar that costs $1, great for them. They will save tons of money over their lifespan. But what's the most important is that when you try something, when you taste something, what kind of emotion you get.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's, there's so many studies out there in terms of, really savoring the chocolate. I think you were saying it earlier about, we tend to eat, but we're not savoring, and chocolate really requires sort of that savoring and taking that moment out and slowing down to really enjoy it. And I find that's what's so special about chocolate. What is the best advice you ever received, either from Michel or Marc Cluizel?
Wow, I've received several. I would say that the one that I've always cherished from the Cluizel family, and specifically, of course, from Michel Cluizel, because when I started 15 years ago, he was even more involved in the business. Today, it's mostly his son Marc, but that shares the same value. Is the fact that the most important thing is that never forget the consumer. Ultimately, the person that pay our salaries is the consumer. And so therefore, wherever or whenever you do something, you have to make sure that you will do that with the final consumer in mind.
That's really wonderful advice. I would love for you to share a story that talks to the Cluizel family's keen attention to the highest quality in their products. I actually read one, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to recount a story on their exacting standards, and they don't sacrifice anything that has to do with quality.
I have two that come to my mind. The one that I probably like the most is we do Morello cherries. Okay, so in France they buy the cherry. And then, they have to macerate for, I think, 18 months, if I'm not mistaken, or a little bit more, in the alcohol. Before then, we can, drain them and then use them to make the Morello cherries boucher. We have one specifically called the Sultan, which is made with that. It's a big boucher, but we make as well all the griotte and so on and so forth. And I remember one year when it was extremely popular, and we had a huge demand. And I said to Michel and to Marc, I said, okay, we need more. And they said, no, it's impossible. I said, what do you mean it's impossible? You have them in the barrel. He said, okay, let me go check again. And they checked, and they said, no, it's not ready. I said, okay, come on, 16 months, 18 months, do you think it makes a difference? And they said, Jacques, it makes a huge difference. And we'd rather lose some business or don't make the business than sell something that is not exactly at the point where we want it.
And there you go. That's a great story in terms of, the notion
I don't know if that's the one that you knew.
No, that's a great story, and I was aware of that story. To sacrifice, to say, look, I'll sacrifice sales to make sure that the product always remains consistent is tremendous. You have a storefront. Do you also sell online? And if so, how much of the business is online?
So yes, we do sell online. The business online is growing more and more. I think that it's something that at first we are still a very small team here, and so it's not that easy. I would say that to manage everything at the same time. But slowly, I think that this business is growing, and that's one of the reasons. When Don mentioned something about the Curve Show, is the fact that we believe that, unfortunately, more and more people have a tendency not to go out and to buy online. And quite frankly, I won't throw the stone to anybody beside myself, because I do the same thing. Anything that I can buy online with the comfort of my work or my office or my house or whatever it is, I do that as well, because it's easy, it's convenient, and everything like that. So definitely it's a point. Today, I would say that it might represent maybe only 15 to 18% of our business. But just to give you an example, I think that maybe 2 years ago it was only 3% of the business. So it's something growing very fast.
And Don mentioned right at the outset that he spotted your products at what was, I guess, a lingerie show. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the specialties that you brought to that show, and why?
Okay, besides the fact that I'm French, and so, of course, French and lingerie, they go together as well as with chocolate. But kidding aside, I would say that that was, at first it was a question of opportunity. One of my friends is in charge of this show, Curve, and before that he was in charge of Cosmiti. So his name is Raphael. And so Raphael one day called me and said, "Oh, Jacques, I'm no longer in tea business, but now I manage a show in New York. It's a lingerie show." Oh, I said, "That's interesting. Get me an invitation. I'd love to go see that. I've never been to one of these shows." And he said, No, I would like you to have a booth. I said, "Absolutely no way. What we have in terms of packaging doesn't fit for the show." And then I hang up, and I started to brainstorm with my team here, and I said, "Look, let's face it. Today, the traditional channel that sells chocolate, they have so much variety of product that when a consumer gets in, he will find a wall of bars. How will he buy it? He doesn't know. He will buy the one that seems to be either he knows the name and the brand, or if not, he will buy the one that seems to be the nicer one." And I said, "Look, I'm in New York most of the time. I see tons of stores that are empty because of people buying online. So I said, why don't we try to go where people have to shop, must shop?" And definitely lingerie is one of the places because, as Don mentioned, yes, people have to try that. So I called him back and I said, "Okay, look, we're not ready yet, but I will have my designers work on a completely different packaging, different kind of product that we have, of course, with the Michel Cluizel chocolate that we have, but which one that will fit to this kind of environment, because we have to take in consideration the temperature and everything like that, and let me come back to you." And we send them several proposals and say, which design do you like? And finally, they liked two of them, and we said, "Look, let's try." And so that's how we introduced this line of product to the show called Petit Plaisir, because we feel that, at the same time, it has to be something convenient and definitely good.
Well, I will tell you a little something that you don't know about me, but my great uncle, who was from Paris, he actually had a marché in Paris where he sold lingerie. So there you go.
Wow. A true French guy.
A true French guy. We've been talking to Jacques Dahan, who's president USA of Chocolates Michel Cluizel. And have you explored drinking chocolate, which, and having been to Europe, I've seen is quite popular in some of the European countries?
Yes, absolutely. I mean that, today, not only at our stores, because we do a lot of hot chocolate or what I would call frozen hot chocolate, but also since we sell, a big part of our business is product that we sell to other chefs and other stores. We have a lot of stores that buy our chocolate and they use that to make their chocolate beverages. And so we have multiple number of recipes, and that's something that is growing. Now, in terms of and we've tried, I know in France, Michel Cluizel and Marc Cluizel, his son, have tried to create a beverage that will be sold already ready to drink. Right now, again, because we are very artisan-minded, we're not there yet. Maybe someday it will happen, but right now we'd rather look, take the real chocolate, boil the milk, pour it on it, that's all you have to do, and whisk it. And in 2 seconds, you have a great chocolate.
Mm-hmm. And what else would you like to be producing? What are your expansion plans for the factory in terms of the types of products you'd like to be making?
So again, because we are in America, and because I think that, here people want to see something always unique. And again, brainstorming with my designer and with other people, we are launching for this upcoming season something, I think, very unique. The first one, 2 boxes. One is just truffles. It's a fan box. And the other one has some truffles, but most importantly, you have 2 levels where you can create your 3D display on the table. But that's not the only originality that we have on this product. It's the fact that when you will lift off the cover, the top, you can have either a jingle, a Christmas jingle, or your personalized message. And it could be, "Hey, Mom and Dad, I'm sorry I can't be here for the holidays, but, I love you very much." And every time that your parents will take the lid off, they will hear your voice. To the point that, last time I was presenting that to somebody, and the person said, "I know exactly what will be my message." And I said, "Okay, what will it be?" And the message will be, "Don't touch my chocolate." So every time somebody will want to have a chocolate, they will leave the top and they will hear my voice saying, "Don't touch my chocolate."
You know, you're so right about Americans really love trying different things, and I was just reminding myself of the cronut that
Yes.
which was that cross between a croissant and a donut that Dominique Ansel created. So I can only imagine some wonderful creativity coming out of the kitchens of Chocolates Michel Cluizel.
Thank you.
I know we're running out of time, but I would love to hear from you, and obviously the passion for the category. I can hear it in your voice. But what advice would you give to a budding chocolatier?
I would say that, to me, the most important is what I've learned from my peers, because I won't say that, I'm qualified to really give advice. So I will just paraphrase what I was told 35 years ago when I started in the business, is that you shouldn't compromise. You should do what you think is the best for you. And making sure that if you believe in that, and that's what I've tried to do all my life in this business, 35 years, so that's quite some time, is to be always the same person and not telling what people want to hear because you feel that that's what they want you to hear. Tell them exactly what you have in your mind. And when you manufacture something, do the same thing. Put everything that you have in it. Maybe you might have some people that don't like it, but so what? You will always find people that will like it. And that's also the beauty of this country, is that, and that's that's probably the first thing that someone told me when I moved in America and I was visiting around in Cherry Hill and I saw so many different kind of churches and synagogues and so on and so forth. And I said to the person, I said, wow, there are so many. And the person said, Jacques, yes, there are many, but if none of them it's your liking and you create one, I'm sure that you will have some followers. And I think that exactly the same thing applies for anything. Be true to what you want to do the best you can, and definitely you will have people that will follow you.
Well, that's a great way to wrap it up. And Don, I'm going to turn it to you so we can close out this interview. And thank you so much, Jacques. Very nice to have you on the show.
And a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much.
We have been talking with Jacques Dahan of Cluizel Chocolates. A link to his website will be on foodandwineinsider.com tonight, where you can hear this and every other Food and Wine Insider program. And tell us what you would like to hear or have them discuss on our future shows.
Ann, do you think it's harder or easier nowadays to get into the food and wine business?
I think that's a great question, Don. I think there are still fairly low barriers to entry into the food business. Part of the reason for this is there continues to be excess capacity. In other words, in most cases, you can find a contract packer to produce your product. Of course, this might not give you a great deal of flexibility in the type of packaging you may want to use, but most specialty producers use co-packers so that they aren't consumed with trying to make the product, but instead can focus on selling the product to retailers or to food service buyers. Of course, you still need money, and most entrepreneurs would admit that they have fully borrowed from friends and family. Today, however, there are so many other ways to raise capital. There's GoFundMe, there's crowdsourcing, there's angel investors, and this gives new entrepreneurs every chance to get their products to market. The important thing to me, however, is not to lose sight of the differentiation of the product in the marketplace and its relevance to your particular target audience. What is your unique selling proposition? What will consumers use your product instead of? Why will they believe your product fits into their life? Have you paid attention to sustainability? Do you support a greater good? Today, consumers want it all. Great taste, by the way, nothing else matters, convenience, a clean ingredient line, a real person behind the product, and a sense that you are providing them something they cannot get anywhere else. Experiment in as many channels as possible. Get the repeat orders coming and stay passionate about what you're doing. Oh, and be sure to make some money at it, because if you're ever thinking about selling the business, that's one of the important questions. Not only your passion, but can you make money in the business? Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Ann. Very insightful.
You've been listening to Food and Wine Insider with Ann Daw and Don Mazzella. Want to join us on a future show? Contact us at foodandwineinsider.com. Until next time, have a passion for food, wine, and profits, and think of our program, Food and Wine Insider.